Whose tax plan is better for the average American family, Trump or Harris? We're going to actually run the numbers and find out. We're going to use census data to build the average American family, and then we're going to apply each tax code to that family and see who they're going to do better with. Talking points are one thing, but data is another. So let's use the data we have and actually just do the math. Okay, first let's establish how much this family makes. And 2022 is the last time we had this data from the Census Bureau, so we're going to use that. And right here it's just under $75,000. We're going to round up to $75,000. The latest data from 2023 shows that each household has an average of 1.94 kids. We're going to round that up to 2. So this is a family that has 2 children and makes $75,000 a year. And to be fair, I'm going to stack the deck against Kamala Harris here. She has a child tax credit structure where if you have a newborn child, the first year of their life, you get the $6,000 child tax credit. Then from ages 1 to 5, it's $3,600. And then 5 to 17, it's $3,000. We're going to make both these kids between 5 and 17 so we don't stack the deck in Harris's favor. Okay, let's start with Trump. Trump's policy is really to make his tax cuts from 2017 permanent. So you wouldn't really necessarily see any reduction in what you're currently seeing now. You just see a continuation of his existing tax plan, which is set to expire in 2025. That doesn't mean he's not going to change his thoughts on child tax credits or he's not going to offer additional cuts, but as of this moment, he hasn't. So right now, we're just going to run the numbers for this family based on the current tax law, because that's exactly what Trump is suggesting. Okay, so let's break down the numbers. Income is $75,000, married filing jointly with 2 kids between 5 and 17. The standard deduction is $27,700. Their tax bracket's going to be 12%, and they're going to get a child tax credit of $2,000 per child, which is $4,000. So when you break all those numbers down, after all their tax credits, their effective tax rate is 2.23%, and they're going to owe $1,676. Let's see how that same family would do with Kamala Harris, who's really leaning into the child tax credit as a main way to get people money back on their taxes, but she also would let Trump's tax cuts expire from 2017 in 2025. So I'm going to do the numbers based on what the tax code was prior to what Trump put in place in 2017. Same family, $75,000 a year, 2 kids between 5 and 17, and their standard deduction, as you can see, is less than half of what it is under Trump, but that's offset by personal exemptions, which is, as you remember how taxes used to be structured, they're not that way anymore. Child tax credits, $3,000 per child for $6,000. When you run all those numbers, you get down to an effective tax rate of 1.22%, owing $915 total. All right, so we break down just the average American family, $75,000 a year with 2 kids. For Harris, they have an effective tax rate of 1.22% and owing $915, whereas Trump, they have an effective tax rate of 2.23%, owing $1,676. Now, just on the bare bones, that's a $761 advantage for Kamala Harris, but there is more to this story. How much you're going to owe in taxes is just one element of this. Donald Trump is proposing a 10% tariff on all imports and a 60% tariff on all Chinese imports, which is going to dramatically affect how much your house can afford basic goods. Don't just take my word for it. Take this extraordinarily conservative think tank's word for it. They say that you're going to owe between $1,700 and $2,350 annually just from the 10% tariff and another $1,950 from the China tariff. That's an additional $4,000 impact on your family that does not come with Harris's proposals. And it's not just that think tank that found this. The Tax Foundation found the same thing. They say that it would equate to about a $300 billion tax hike on you. And that's just on the 10% tariff, not even including the China tariff. So when you go back to our original math and you factor in what we just talked about, Trump is actually at a $4,736 disadvantage for the average American family. That's not even accounting for the fact that Harris has in her plans for the average American family a ton of incentive for them to save on healthcare costs, for them to have an opportunity to purchase their first home if they haven't done so already. She has so many different elements within this plan that are going to be beneficial beyond just beating Trump head-to-head in straight-up tax structure. And I know the average person is going to say, look, that stuff you just talked about, that's going to cost money and it's going to come out of my pocket in the end, right? Wrong, and I'll show you why. This is a chart breaking down how Harris's tax plans would affect people in 2026 based on their current income. So if you have a lower income over here, you're still going to get a pretty good savings, about $2,000 a year, $3,000 a year, somewhere in that zone. It's really up here when you're in the top 0.1% where you're getting screwed. But that is where the money is coming from. The revenue generating from taxing them is how they're going to pay for this stuff. You're not going to feel it. They are. And by contrast, here is Donald Trump's chart, which unsurprisingly backs up the exercise we just did, because if you were lower income, you make far less money under Trump, and if you are a very wealthy person, you do very well under Donald Trump. And that is the critical difference. Just jumping back to Harris's chart for a second, to reiterate, This loss in income from the top 0.1%, that is where the revenue is coming from to pay for the majority of Harris's proposals. It is not coming from your pocket. You are doing great under Harris. It is coming from their pocket. So, when you toss the talking points out the window, get rid of the messaging, and just look at the numbers, it's abundantly clear that Kamala Harris's plans not only are better for you just from a straight taxation perspective if you're an average American, but they're also better for you when you factor in all the other elements of how their two policy structures are going to affect your bottom line as a household. I really got to give Republicans credit too, because they have done an exceptional job messaging that the opposite of what I've just presented is true. And I think a lot of Republicans are going to watch this and believe that what I'm saying is just a big pile of lies. My advice to that group of people is do opposition research on yourself. Try to prove me wrong, and if you can't, consider that I might actually be right.